that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. So lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and the very famous Tom Fennell.
Hello, everybody.
Man about town, philanthropist. You can, if you don't believe me, you can see it at the BCTV website. It says so right there.
I'm signing autographs after the show.
Absolutely. Every day I go to the web and I find out what the news is. And I keep track of the news, posting the 10 or 15 articles that I think are the most interesting at my website, geoharvey.wordpress.com. That's geoharvey.wordpress.com. And I post a synopsis for each of 10 to 15 articles together with a link that goes to the article. They're organized by date. If you see something that you want to find out about, you can go there and look into it in more detail. Most of these articles are much longer than what we talk about here. Nevertheless, we're going to start with something which I think is downright cute. And it's not that she is cute, it's that what she did is cute.
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both. But here is a girl, her name is Kiara Niergan, I think. I don't know that I'm pronouncing it. Yeah, it's close enough. She lives in South Africa and Johannesburg, and she is 16 years old. And South Africa is going through its worst drought on record, which is not all that different from a lot of places in the world.
No, that's correct, but it's a pretty bad drought.
It's a bad drought.
I've seen some of the pictures, dead elephants and stuff like that.
It's terrible. And she wanted to do something about it, so she invented what's called a SuperAbsorbent Polymer. Why don't you read the title to this?
Oh, Kiara Niergan.
Yeah.
Niergan.
Yeah.
Won Google's Community Impact Award.
Yeah. With South Africa in its worst...
Which is, I guess, pretty important.
It is. In its worst drought in history, a 16-year-old schoolgirl from Johannesburg created a superabsorbent polymer out of orange peel and avocado skins. It's capable of storing reserves of water hundreds of times its own weight, forming reservoirs that would allow farmers to maintain their crops at minimal cost. And my recollection, you might remember the specifics on this, but she got a scholarship, is that right?
Well, she got this award.
Yeah.
And in all likelihood, she is going to get a scholarship.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think she probably is. This is from CNN.
Interesting story here. Now, you look at her, she looks Indian.
Yeah.
And her name sounds Indian.
Yeah.
So very likely she is of Indian
extraction.
And the British, of course, when they ruled South Africa, brought in hordes of Indians to do all the administrative stuff because they're good at it. You know? The Indians
also businesses. They run a lot of businesses.
And many of them stayed there. Matter of fact, Gandhi lived 20 years in South Africa.
In South Africa, yes, I know.
You know, so I want to just say what she had to say about it because it's inspirational.
Tell us.
I wanted to minimize the effect that the drought has on our community, and the main thing it affects is the crops. I started researching what a superabsorbent polymer was. This is a high school kid now.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
And
there she is.
And what they all had in common was a chain molecule polysaccharide. Well, I'm not even sure I know what that is.
Polysaccharide is kind of like starch.
Starch, okay. Yeah, okay.
Kind of like.
I found that orange peel has 64% polysaccharide and also the gelling agent pectin, so I saw it as a good option. And I used avocado skin due to the oil.
Yeah, is anybody going to call this girl stupid?
She combined the skin and the peel and left the mixture in the sun, and when they reacted together to form the powerfully absorbent polymer.
And you know what? I think she's probably smarter than Donald Trump.
I wouldn't bet against that. The takeaway here is this teenager has many more ideas, including a proposal to dye the skins of endangered animals to discourage poaching.
How about that?
What a simple idea and probably very effective.
Could be. And you know, it was a funny thing because I was telling Tori Wiekers about this. Tori is she's what they call in Yiddish, your upstairsiker. Upstairsiker.
I never heard that term.
The person who lives upstairs. And I referred to this girl as a little girl. And she said, how old is she? And I said, 16. She said, she's not a little girl. 16 years isn't. I'm sorry. Okay, I have a 16-year-old granddaughter. I'm entitled.
She's a little girl.
She's a little girl. But it reminded me, after that conversation, of a story I heard about an 87-year-old woman whose grandson came to her house where she lived, and had lived almost her entire life, and said, you know, Grandma, who's mowing your lawn? And she said, oh, the little boy next door. And he said, well, who helps you if you need help in the house with plumbing? Or, oh, the little boy next door. The little boy helps you with plumbing? What else does he help you? Well, he helps me with my taxes. The little boy next door had lived next door for 60 years. What can you say?
It's all a matter of perspective.
I suppose it is. I suppose. Okay.
Yeah, moving right along.
All right. Our next one is from Electric Light and Power.
The New York Independent System Operator
ISO.
doesn't need Jinna nuclear plant beyond March 2017.
How do you like that?
Now, isn't this one of the plants we were talking about was going to get the
They're going to get their subsidy, yeah. Exelon Corp said in its August 9th quarterly form 10Q report that the New York ISO has said it doesn't need the Jinna nuclear power plant beyond March of next year for grid reliability purposes. Jinna is a 581 megawatt single unit pressurized water reactor located in Ontario County, New York.
That's the end of the Finger Lakes.
Yes.
They're right on Lake Canandaigua.
Yes.
Canandaigua, I guess it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, southeast of Rochester. It's the same area we're talking about.
That must be basically the same design as the Vermont Yankee plant was.
I wouldn't at all be surprised.
It's about the same size
built
anyway.
by Rochester Gas and Electric.
Okay.
They took the whole supply for years.
Yeah.
But then they sold it to Exelon. And Exelon is feeding it into the grid. Now the grid's saying, hey, we don't need it anymore.
Well, this is what's going to be happening, I think, more and more with these nuclear power plants.
Well, I guess the grid operator's looking at economics, you know, and they're figuring they can get the power cheaper.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And probably from wind and sun, because they're so much cheaper than nuclear or coal.
Well, all along that lakefront, there's wind.
Yeah. The only thing
they
need to do is...
They haven't exploited it yet, but
yeah.
it's coming.
Well, they've got some things going in. Okay. Next item.
Scotland is 100% wind powered. Only for a day, but it was 100% wind power.
Actually, it was 106. This is from...
Let me get a picture.
My mouse is not working, so I'm a little bit slow here. This is from Renews, and those flowers that are next to the wind turbine are not next to the wind turbine. They're really close. The wind turbine is quite far away. If the flowers were
pretty.
Yeah, aren't they? Wind power generated the equivalent of all of Scotland's electricity needs on the 7th of August, according to WWF, that's World Wildlife Fund Scotland. Analysis by WWF of data provided by Weather Energy found that for August 7th, wind turbines in Scotland provided 93,545 megawatt hours to the national grid. Scotland's demand for the day was 37,202 megawatt hours.
I think we're going to touch base on this again.
Yeah, we're going to get, this is something that just kept in the news. This just kept showing up over and over. My bet is I've seen well over 100 headlines in the last week that relate to this particular story.
Well, it's significant, really. It's a milestone. I mean, they've accomplished something.
It is.
And the Scottish government, this is a takeaway here, the Scottish government's energy strategy is to set a goal of securing half of their energy from renewables by 2030.
Half.
Half, yeah.
Half.
Well, they'll do it.
Think they're going to do that?
I think they're almost there now.
I think they're almost there, yeah. They're going to hit it way before 2030 unless something terrible happens. So, yeah, should we go on to the next one?
Move on.
All right, blue and green tomorrow.
Release of latest data on the German biogas industry. This is interesting. You never hear of it.
Yeah.
And apparently it's all over the place over there.
It is. Germany added 150 biogas plants in 2015 with 23 megawatts of capacity. This is the smallest annual increase since the Renewable Energy Sources Act was adopted in the year 2000. The overall pace of additional construction is somewhat disappointing. Nearly 9,000 biogas plants are currently operational in Germany.
9,000.
9,000.
And how many are there in America?
Well, the last time I looked was about a year ago, and there were about 300 in the United States.
Okay.
There were 16 in Vermont.
I was going to say 12, so they're up to 16 now.
A year ago they were. Now, Green Mountain Power is installing biogas plants along Lake Champlain, and my recollection is 6 of them. They aren't necessarily doing that themselves, but they're kind of helping the project along. And the reason is because they want to use those plants not only for electricity, but for the environmental objective of decreasing the amount of phosphorus going into the lake.
That's a big problem.
It's a big problem.
This time of year,
yeah.
The lake turns green.
Yeah, and the algae that does that very often is very toxic.
Yes, I've read
so
that.
So this is a problem. It's blue-green algae, which is actually classed as cyanobacteria, and not all blue-green algae is toxic. Some of it is not, and in fact, some of it you can actually buy in capsules so that you can eat it as a nutritional supplement.
Okay.
Really, you know.
I'll take your word for it.
And it's supposed to be extremely good for you, but that stuff up there, don't trust it. But the Vermont had 16 of these plants before California got its first one. And the USDA said we could have 11,000 of them on farms, but the fact is the USDA had a bunch of ideas about what was required that are not necessarily really required. And the farm plants are only a small piece of the pie. Every municipal waste treatment plant could do biodigesting. And you could, if you collected the food waste from New York City, you could operate a huge plant just doing this.
In London, they're using coffee grounds.
That's right. You could use coffee grounds. Now, there's other things you could do with this stuff. For example, with coffee grounds, it's pretty easy to grow mushrooms. So there's more than one thing to do. But nevertheless, you can get electricity out of it. The byproducts, regardless of where you're going along this, whether it comes from farm waste or municipal waste,
it doesn't care.
Or it doesn't care.
Yeah.
The byproducts include liquid, which can be pure enough when it's released that you can just release it into the environment.
I would imagine it had some fertilizing value.
You get fertilizer out of it, and this is something that I've mentioned before. The plant that my son worked at, where he installed the controls and he installed the centrifuges, no longer uses electricity from the grid. It's a self-sufficient municipal waste project for serving a community of 100,000 people, and it releases water into Lake Michigan right next to a public beach. The water is considered, for practical purposes, pure.
Okay.
It has no smell. I've been in the plant, and the final product from the municipal waste is classified as a Class A EPA-rated fertilizer. You could grow carrots in it.
So they're taking the energy out in the form of gas, and what's left is still useful as fertilizer.
That's right.
Sounds like a win-win situation.
It is.
To me.
Now, I will point out this particular project, you can't just do biodigesting and have all pathogens removed. That's not going to happen. In this particular project, they have a multi-step operation where they have a biodigester, which is a reactor that's biological. Then they have a thing called a Pondus reactor. It's the first Pondus reactor installed in the United States. That in that reactor, they heat the material taken out of the biodigester, the first biodigester, up to 180 degrees.
Okay, so they're purifying it.
That's Fahrenheit. Yeah, they're purifying
Pasteurizing it.
And they treat it with sulfuric acid.
Oh boy.
Now the reason for this is because they want to destroy everything that's alive in there.
Okay.
Not because they want it not to be alive, but because they want its contents, the cell contents, to be available for the next biodigestion process.
Sounds like somebody did some good thinking here.
Right, and then it goes through a second Pondus reactor. That increases the amount of methane that it produces by about 30%. And that's what comes out of the second reactor is then processed again in a process that is designed to dry it down to a moisture content of about 7%. And it comes out in pretty dry bricks. And that last drying process also happens to pasteurize it. So there's no life in there. The one thing that I don't like about this is I don't like the idea that I mean, if you consider municipal waste coming in, there are going to be toxins in there that are not removed by this process.
I would think.
So, I'd like to see the stuff be checked. But nevertheless, from the point of view of dealing with municipal waste, good idea.
This is the way to go.
Yeah, and
I'm sure that the industry is looking at them.
Yep. Farm waste, you can do the same thing. And as a matter of fact, I've mentioned this before, biodigesters, I've read there's 1 million of them in China. They do it at the home.
They're small in China.
Small, home-operated facilities. You put your food waste in, you get compost out, you get gas out.
You use that for cooking.
You use the gas for cooking. So, there you go. Okay, anyway, we're up to Friday, August 12th.
We got a picture coming up.
We do, and there it is. And this is an important one from Renewables International.
Well, this is a real picture.
It's a real picture.
Right off of Rhode Island.
That's right. So what's the title of this,
The first American offshore wind turbines have been installed.
Okay, this is the first one of 5 at the Deepwater Wind Project, which is a small project by world standards, but it's America's
first one here.
American offshore wind power is one step closer to becoming a reality with the installation of the first turbines at Deepwater Wind's Block Island project now complete. The Block Island wind farm will be America's first offshore wind farm, and it remains on schedule to be fully commissioned this fall.
They're going to make it. I mean,
oh yeah, there's no question.
All of the turbines are there.
Yep.
Okay. All of the cables have been installed.
Yep.
So they're just going to put everything together and turn it on by the fall.
Yeah, and that picture, by the way, let's put it back up again. The picture on the left side of the picture, what you see there, that orange thing, jacked up out of the water, is a ship that has jacks to jack it up.
We've shown pictures of that.
Yeah, we show pictures of it, and anybody who's never seen one of those things before, somebody who's new to the show.
It's a whole factory.
That's I mean, people live on that. This is not small. This is big. This is like, well,
it's 5 stories high anyhow.
Oh, actually, that one I think is probably 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And it's got a huge crane. These things are not
designed for the purpose.
Yeah, that's right. It's designed specifically for that purpose.
And it's also interesting. It's sitting there on legs.
Yes.
It's anchored to the ground. It's anchored to the ocean bed.
Yep.
We talked last week about some floating turbines.
Yeah.
But here in the East Coast, almost the entire East Coast is about 100 miles of flat, shallow land called the continental shelf.
That's right.
We could power more than the United States from turbines out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is all available, and there are people who object that some bird is going to get killed
people
by
can object to everything.
They are, I mean,
you've heard me say, as soon as somebody says "let's," before they finish the sentence, there's an ad hoc group forming to oppose it.
Right. I think it's true. I think that's true. Okay.
Well, we're moving along here. We're moving back to Vermont.
Back to Vermont. This is from Vermont Biz. Got a title, Tom?
Yeah, WindWorks Vermont launches pro-wind campaign.
Well, how about that?
So they're
what a
trying
surprise.
to counteract some of this misinformation.
Yeah, and believe me,
There's a lot.
There's a lot of misinformation, and I have spent time trying to find out what the truth was, and everything that I've heard from them is not true. It's kind of amazing. I'm speaking of people who are opposing wind power. Everything.
The last item that we're going to talk about is exactly that.
Yeah.
And so.
What this says is a coalition of individuals and businesses seeking to protect Vermont's environment and repower the state with local renewables have launched a campaign in support of wind power in Vermont. The coalition, Windworks VT, launched a website and will promote wind power as an essential part of the state's energy future. And I will tell you, I went to Wind Power VT, and it's not much of a website. At least not yet. They just started, so they've got their work cut out for them.
Interesting takeaway from this article. Wind power became a central issue in the Democratic primary.
Yeah.
And the candidate that best articulated the benefits of wind power for Vermont won.
Yes.
Yeah, I
That
think
was
that
Sue
Don,
Minter.
at the last minute talking about wind power, hurt it.
I think it did, but honestly,
I'm not sure that he was understood.
I
but
don't
it
think
hurt
he
him.
was. But nevertheless, Sue Minter was running a pretty good campaign. Matt Dunn was running a pretty good campaign. It was really nice in that primary to be able to say, yeah, I think I'm going to vote as a Democrat because I've got a choice there. And I've got two really good people that I can choose from.
Actually, if you take Peter, he was a good guy too, except for his violent opposition to
To wind power.
I mean, it's violent.
Yeah, well, I'm
He's
sorry.
never seen a windmill that he doesn't hate.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. But I'm not sure that, the violence, one of the things about wind power, it's not just wind power. Every single form of renewable energy has got some committee somewhere.
Somewhere, yeah.
Grassroots committee.
Yeah, absolutely
opposing
true.
it. And
well, we can't have these solar panels leaking onto the ground.
yeah. And
You know, back in the turn of the last century, when houses started becoming electrified,
yes.
there were people out there saying that the outlets you put in a wall are going to leak electricity. It's going to hurt you.
Yes. Well,
This is real.
there are people who believe they do. And I don't know, maybe they do. But there's a great movie, I'll recommend it to anybody, called Topsy Turvy, which is about the original production of The Mikado,
yeah.
Gilbert and Sullivan.
Yeah.
And I think it's Gilbert's father comes to his house and is upset because he has had to stand on the porch waiting for somebody to open the door. And Gilbert said, why didn't you just use the doorbell? And his father says, because it's electric. He doesn't want to electrocute himself. Well, the doorbell was a pull string attached to an electric switch. Anyway, we are up to Saturday, August 13th, and we have a picture of this.
Yeah, let me get it up.
Yeah.
This is in England, isn't it?
It is, and this is Solar Power Portal.
Well, renewables set new quarterly generation record on the back of solar growth.
This is kind of astonishing. The UK's surging solar PV capacity has helped the country to a new quarterly renewable energy generation record. In Q1 2016, renewables generated 25.1% of the UK's electricity, despite lower than expected wind speeds and rainfall. That means, of course, that the wind turbines and the hydro plants produced less power than they could have if they had full resources available.
Yep.
That figure is up 2.3 percentage points on generation recorded in Q1 2015. And as I read this, I'm thinking I should look and see what the coal generation in the UK was for the first quarter. I would bet it was below 20%.
I think that article mentioned it.
Did it?
I think so.
Well,
but one of the articles that we did
mentioned
it,
coal.
It's going down. It's going
down.
Economics.
It's going down in the United States. We had less than 23%. We had less than 24% of our electricity generated by coal in April and May. I think April and May, March and April, It was
Fear
low.
not, Trump's going to put the coal mines back in business.
Well, that, you know, and he'll bring the manual typewriter back too, and reintroduce Surreys with fringes on the top. Okay, and here we have our next item, which is coming up from Interesting Engineering, something that is Donald Trump really hates.
Scotland holds the largest oil reserve in the EU, but they've proved they don't need it.
Isn't this amazing?
Wow.
Who'd have thunk?
That's a pretty ominous picture there.
Yeah, it is, but it's not the wind turbines that are making smoke, it's clouds that are really dark. Scotland is pledging to reach 100% renewable sustainability for energy production by the year 2020. 2020, that's just around the corner. A reasonable goal after meeting 100% of its energy demand through wind power alone for a day. It was actually 106%. Scotland is believed to have the largest oil reserves in Europe, but it has proven they don't need them.
There's a little backstory here. On August 7th, the storm produced gale-force winds.
Yes.
That saw the country get battered by gusts exceeding 115 miles an hour.
Now, there's an interesting other story that the reporter who wrote this didn't mention.
Yeah.
When the wind gets that strong, the wind turbines furl to avoid damage and they don't generate electricity.
Well, it must be sort of halfway in between, because a lot of the wind produced this extra energy.
Right, but it wasn't.
But then when it got bad enough, I know that they furled.
But it didn't get that bad everywhere all at once.
Correct.
So they had huge wind power coming on, even though not all of the wind turbines were generating power.
That's probably exactly.
You know,
right.
This is.
They know what's going on.
They know what's going on.
They don't want the wind to blow these things down.
No, they don't. And of course, winds that get up to 115 miles an hour are. I don't know how many people actually experience that.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
I don't think you could stand up in that.
No, I lived south of Boston when Hurricane Bob hit, and also the perfect storm, which were about 8 weeks apart, and we were without electricity for over a week both times. During Hurricane Bob, I was hunkered down in my home, and I was hearing explosions. And when the explosions, and then the storm suddenly went away and the sky was blue, and I kind of went out on my porch and looked at it and then came back in again because I knew what was going to happen next, and the next thing you know, it was going like mad again. That was the eye going over.
Okay.
But the explosions, I found out what they were. I went out after the storm went away, and there were trees, big trees that had been snapped like
matchsticks.
Matchsticks,
yep,
yeah,
that's
exactly.
the word, isn't it? Snapped like matchsticks.
That's right, and they sounded like explosions when they did that. And of course, they brought power lines down too. But anyway, there is that.
The article mentions also that Scotland makes use of tidal energy, solar, and hydro.
Yes.
Besides wind.
And it was making hydro during those gales. I don't know if it was making solar power, because I don't know what time of day it was, but you know, they had other sources of electricity. They were exporting electricity.
They were doing pretty well for themselves.
Yeah, they were. Okay, we are up to Sputnik International, which, by the way, is not produced by the Russian government.
The title of this one should be "The Plot Thickens." Espionage arrest of nuclear engineer fuels UK Chinese Hinkley deal doubts.
Well,
now we've talked about Hinkley here a lot.
We've talked about Hinkley a lot, and of course, Theresa May, who is the new Prime Minister of the UK, has, you know, she kind of said, well, I'm going to think about this Hinkley deal a little bit before we commit to it. And of course, that happened apparently just as the board of directors of Hinkley were meeting, of EDF, I'm sorry, were meeting to determine that they were going to go ahead with it. And they determined were going to go ahead with it. And the union, which was part of they had representatives on the board, were really upset because they said nobody told anybody that Theresa May was going to do that. At least nobody on the board told anybody, even though she had told board members. Yeah. So they were saying this vote that they had was invalid. And she apparently is upset about the Chinese having security things with the UK. And
well, she's got it right, apparently, by this headline.
Yep, and as a matter of fact, and I think this is going to be coming up next week. I don't think this was included in this week's news. Did I mention this? The Crown Estate?
Yes, that's coming up.
It's coming up. Okay,
coming
we
up.
will get to that.
Yeah.
The Crown Estate weighed in on this deal. I
I'll
think
explain what the Crown Estate is.
when we get there. But I think this. In this case, I'll read what our little synopsis. Britain's Chinese partner in the Hinkley Point power plant has been accused of plotting to steal U.S. nuclear secrets. A nuclear engineer for the state-owned China General Nuclear is accused of setting up new U.S. experts to obtain sensitive information confirming the worst suspicions of the critics of the UK-Chinese nuclear deal. This is a guy...
There's a lot going on behind the
Oh,
scenes
there's
here.
weird stuff. And I wonder if Theresa May knew about this before she said, I think we're going to rethink this. She might have.
Well, I'd bet you, but you wouldn't take the bet that it isn't going to open.
Oh, I'm not going to take that bet. I don't know. It depends upon what odds you're going to give, Tom.
Yeah, right.
1,000 to 1? Okay, we are up to Sunday,
Another
August
picture here
14th. We do indeed.
Yeah, we do.
And more wind turbines. By golly, there's wind turbines all over
All
the place.
over the place. Look at all those wind turbines.
We put up pictures of things that we have news stories about that are supplied with the news stories.
Usually come with the article, yeah.
Yeah, in this particular case, it didn't.
Oh.
The story was about wind turbines in Wyoming, so I went out and found a picture of wind turbines in Wyoming.
Okay.
And because I wanted a picture for the blog for this story, and so this comes from the Los Angeles Times. We have a title for the story,
Yeah.
Tom?
Who owns the wind?
Whoa!
We do, Wyoming says, and it's taxing those who use it.
4 years ago, the Wyoming legislature began entertaining a lofty question: who owns the wind? They concluded, quickly and conveniently, that Wyoming does. When they did something, they did something no other state has ever done. They decided to tax the wind, and they do.
One of the things that's happening is this wind power that's generated in Wyoming. They're selling it. It's
Yes.
going to places like California.
Yes.
The stuff that they use themselves is coming from the coal, of which Wyoming has plenty.
Yes.
And the coal probably has a lobby.
Yes. Probably.
And they're probably important.
But you know, I have a question, Tom. Really? Okay. Suppose you have a property in Wyoming, you know, a few acres, and you have a choice of putting up a wind turbine or not putting up a wind turbine.
Yeah.
Should the state tax you if you decide to put up a wind turbine and not if you don't decide to put up a wind turbine? It's the same wind. You should get taxed both ways, shouldn't you?
Well, it's the same wind, yeah.
Yeah. So they should tax everybody equally. Everybody who owns a wind turbine should pay tax. Everybody who doesn't own a wind turbine. Okay, I'm just having fun.
There's a little takeaway here, and
Yeah.
it makes sense. To some in the wind industry, the tax increase is about politics.
Yes.
Wyoming's lashing out at clean energy as payback for federal policy aimed at scaling back the coal industry,
Yes.
on which the state has always relied.
Yes.
And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and the other thing too, and in all fairness, we should say this: the taxes that they're levying on the wind power are not huge.
No, they're very small.
They're very small.
But nevertheless, and this is from the article too, no major wind projects have been constructed in Wyoming since the tax took effect in 2012.
Well,
But there's a couple of them in the works.
there's one of them will be the biggest wind project ever in the world.
Is it? Yeah.
If it's
This is the one that's going to San Diego.
Yeah, they're going to supply power to San Diego. That's the intention, and I forget. I think it's 7 gigawatts, and you know, which means
that's a pretty big.
that's a pretty big plant. You know, even
That's like 15 Yankees.
yeah, even if you know the power is down on, even if you've got the lowest production of the year, it would produce more power than Vermont Yankee, I would guess.
Yeah.
You know.
I would figure.
Okay, and now we are up to an article Still on Sunday, August 14th, from the Weekend Leader. And this, I think,
This is a good picture.
this is a good article.
Good article.
It's a nice article. It's not long, but it's great. So
that
what's the title?
picture there is the little town in Bangladesh
Yes.
that we're talking about.
Yes.
A remote village in the Sundarbans gets solar power due to the efforts of local women.
Of local
And
women.
that's what the article's
Yeah.
all about.
The
They
wor-
took it on themselves.
They
to do
took it on themselves. The World Wildlife Fund offered the people of the village of Sandarpara in Bangladesh home solar systems, but many people were skeptical. They were worried in the article. They were worried about what happens if they bring this solar in, and then it breaks down and nobody's here who knows how to
Nobody knows
repair
how to
it.
fix it.
Okay?
Yep.
So they were skeptical. Then local women formed a self-help group and found an acceptable answer. A 4.1 kilowatt PV array provides power, and each home has its own battery-powered energy access kit, which consists of a battery, basically. And what they do is they go, just like going to the village well and getting a bucket of water.
You get a bucket of electricity.
You get a bucket of electricity. And these are people who live on an island in Bangladesh. And, you know, when the world electrified, it passed them by.
Well, the article talks about the way they had to live.
Yes,
I mean, as soon as darkness came,
yes,
it was dangerous because there was tigers there.
yes.
And it starts talking about a woman whose husband got killed by a
was
tiger.
killed by a tiger.
So the presence of light now keeps the tigers away from the village, and they can live.
Right. The guy was coming in late from the fields, and he yelled out that he was being attacked,
Yeah.
and they couldn't do anything because they couldn't see him.
Yeah.
So he died because a tiger attacked. And it happens that they live right next door, practically, to a wildlife
A
sanctuary.
wildlife preserve, yeah.
Yeah, and where there's tigers. So there's lots of tigers around, and no particular interest in getting rid of them.
A quick takeaway there. And look at, I'll leave the picture up there. The power station is the most prominent structure in the village. It produces and stores enough electricity every day to meet the energy requirements of all the residents.
Yeah, and you can tell these people are not energy hogs. 4.1 kilowatts.
Some of them might have a TV.
Oh man, yeah, with a low wattage screen.
And it says on full capacity, which each household has now,
Yep.
the batteries can power 2 bulbs of 100 watts each and a fan for up to 3 to 4 days,
Really?
which is a tremendous improvement
Yeah, that's a huge
for
improvement.
what they had.
Right. So we're up to Monday, August 15th,
got another
which
nice
today
picture
we're
from
recording on Tuesday, by the way, so we're only going to Monday.
We got another nice picture.
It's a
coming up.
nice picture, yeah.
Well, this is kind of a scary picture.
It's a scary picture. And by the way, that is not a picture of Louisiana.
It
But
isn't, huh?
It is the picture that came with the article. I don't know where that is, but it's in a Spanish-speaking country. And
Oh, is it? Oh, yeah?
yeah, it is. Okay, this is from the Pacific Standard. What do we got for a title for it?
Yeah, here it is.
Here it is.
America's latest 500-year rainstorm is underway right now in Louisiana.
Yeah,
And this was just yesterday.
yeah.
That they-
Well,
that
this article
appeared.
appeared actually the day before yesterday, I think, and I got it yesterday.
You
morning,
got it yesterday.
really early. By mid-morning Friday, in just a 12-hour stretch, more than a foot of rain fell near Kentwood, Louisiana.
Foot of rain.
A foot of rain in
Wow.
12 hours. It's an inch an hour. It was a downpour with an estimated likelihood of just once every 500 years. Don't worry about it. It's never going to happen again in our lifetimes. And roughly 3 months worth of rainfall during a typical hurricane season. It's the latest in a string of what had once been rare rainstorms. It reminds me very much of those terrible floods in the Midwest that happened during Bill Clinton's presidency. I don't remember the year, but I remember my daughter was going out on a train, and she said the train ran through the flood.
Wow.
The train track was above the flood level, so they didn't have to slow down for it. But they were. She said it was like riding through a lake
Yeah.
for like an hour and a half.
Wow.
This thing was big. And one of the things that I remember seeing on the television was that they were interviewing somebody who lived along the Mississippi River, and he said, well, this is a 500-year flood, and we had another 500-year flood 3 years ago. And believe me, this is becoming not exceptional.
The day they wrote this, they said high-resolution models predict another 1 to 2 feet of rain by Saturday morning.
Crazy.
Wow.
Absolutely crazy. And the governor of the state declared a bunch of counties disaster areas, and they were going to stay disaster areas until at least the 10th of September.
Oh, boy. We had a lot of rain last Saturday.
We sure did.
We had some real heavy rain.
Yeah, and it's been a tough one this year because we've been having drought and heavy rain.
Yep, nothing in between.
Nothing much in between. Boy, and of course, warm weather, hot weather, and then what are we going to have next? I don't know.
Well, apropos of what you just said, though, today's rainstorm in Louisiana is at least the 8th 500-year rainfall event across America in a little more than a year.
8th in a year.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know how big these areas are, but the area of Louisiana that we're talking about.
Oklahoma, Central Texas,
Yeah.
South Carolina, Northern Louisiana, West Virginia, Maryland. They're all over the place.
They're all over. And, we could have them here. I mean, we
certainly could.
Hurricane Katrina could come back. Hurricane Sandy could come back. They could both come back at the same time. Things are getting worse. So, and one of the things that I've said all my life is one thing that you can always predict about the weather is that it's going to be weird.
I never heard that statement.
But
it's a good one.
It's true. The weather is always weird. And there's a certain amount of truth in the thing that Donald Trump said, where he says, it's just weather, except for one thing. He's talking about climate change. And climate change is not just weather.
Yes.
And to pretend that it is, I think, is doing a real disservice to the people of this country. And I think, you might be able to tell that I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump. Should we go on?
Let's move along. We're going to come back to Hinkley Point.
We come back to Hinkley Point. This is from The Guardian.
Crown Estate wades into Hinkley Point nuclear debate.
Hinkley Point is getting pummeled here. Over and over. And should be. The Crown Estate has waded into the battle over Hinkley Point, pointing out that offshore wind farms are already cheaper than the proposed atomic reactors. The Crown Estate said that wind farms at sea will be set on course to meet 10% of the country's electricity by 2020. Hinkley Point was supposed to produce 7% by 2017 or 2016, back when it was first proposed, but it hasn't.
Going to do it.
It isn't going to do it. It's not going to do it in 10 years. Okay. They're saying it's already they're already going to reach 10%. Why are they building this thing?
Well, as I've said, there's something going on there.
Something going on. Somebody is going to make a whole lot of money.
Yeah. That's the bottom line.
That's the bottom line. We should talk about what the Crown Estate is.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was. Never heard of it before, so I looked it up.
Yep.
It's a collection of lands and holdings belonging to the British monarch as a corporation sole, and it looks like probably a French word.
Yeah.
Legal term. I don't know what exactly it means. But
nobody knows what a legal term means.
Public estate, which is neither government property nor part of the monarch's private estate.
Yes.
Well, we know the Queen's wealthy,
this
isn't part of it.
This is not part of the wealth.
As a result of this arrangement, the sovereign is not involved with the management or administration of the state, exercising only very limited control.
Yeah.
So there's a board of directors.
This is property that is in some kind of way the Queen's, but she doesn't have any control over it.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure that she has any benefit from it.
I'm not sure of that either.
It's being
One
run.
of those weird things that the Brits do.
Well, it's kind of like federal land in the United States. In theory, it belongs to everybody, right? I mean,
right.
This is a socialist country. Everybody owns a piece of the pie. It's kind of like Milo Binder in Catch-22, who had that corporation and everybody owns a share. Do you remember that?
I don't
Hated
think I ever
socialists.
saw the movie.
I read the book. I didn't like the movie, but the book was very funny and very disturbing. But Milo Binder was a rabid anti-socialist, anti-communist who had a company that he formed that everybody owned a share. Didn't matter who you were, and he was willing to do business with anybody. And it was Second World War, and he actually leased bombers from the in the fiction.
Yeah.
He leased bombers from the American Army and then leased their use to the German Army to bomb their own base. And, it was pretty crazy. But everybody owned a share, and that meant that he could fly these bombers that had his insignia on them, and everybody respected it because everybody knew what it was, to Krakow and buy sausage and exchange it for eggs that came from Malta. Well, the point is, he was rabidly anti-socialist, and everybody owned a share. And if you think about federal property in the United States, everybody owns a share. Citizens.
I guess you're right.
And that's kind of like Queen Elizabeth owning the Crown Estate. We don't have anything to say about that share we own in this country because we're citizens. Yeah. Do we? I mean, the federal government can say you're not allowed to be on there. That's government property.
Doesn't matter what we think.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what we think. And in fact, if you go into a socialist country, that's how socialism works. Everybody owns everything, and nobody's allowed to use it except for somebody who, I have a friend who was born in Leningrad, and in fact, her mother was in Leningrad for the entire Second World War. Think about that. They had a siege that was over 400 days.
That's right.
People were dying like mad.
More than a year, yeah. You couldn't get food.
Couldn't get food. And she said that her uncle, she visited Moscow when she was young, and she came back and she told her uncle about it. Her uncle was retired and living in Leningrad. And she said that she had been to the room that Lenin lived in, and it was kind of almost Spartan. There was no decoration. It was kept the way that it was when he was living in the Kremlin. That's the room that he lived in, and it was kept the way he had it, where there was really no decoration on the walls. There was no curtain. There was a simple bed, a simple chair, a desk where he could sit, practically nothing else, a light bulb hanging from a string from the ceiling, or whatever. And she described this to his uncle, and his uncle said, when Lenin was the head of the Soviet Union, he, the uncle, had been an employee of the motor pool in the Kremlin. He said, Lenin may have had a simple room. Whether he slept in it or not, I don't know. But he had 5 Rolls Royces. So, what can you say? It's kind of like free market capitalism. The idea of communism is everybody owns a piece of everything, and it's a tiny oligarchy running a state monopoly ownership of properties so that everything is controlled. Well, in the United States, we have an attempt which is labeling itself free market that wants a tiny oligarchy to control a marketplace that belongs to that is ostensibly open to anybody who wants to be in it.
Same circus, different clouds.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, free market economy. How do you deal with a free market economy collection of waste? I don't know. How do you deal with a free market economy and pollution?
Well, if you had a free market economy, we've never even tried it.
No. And if we did try it, the people who are trying so hard to get there and funding it, as opposed to those who are trying so hard to get there and not funding it, but the people funding it would say, I'm not going to do that.
Yep.
Or at least that's what I think. Okay.
Well, we're coming back home here.
Go on?
This is a very interesting article.
Okay, and we do have a picture for this. There it is.
Let me pull it up.
Up on the thing there. That is Jeremy Turner, who is a forester. He's a professional forester. He knows what he's doing.
Well, this is what I find very interesting about that. This picture here is.
Yeah.
And I've been up there, and you have too.
Absolutely.
This is up on top of a ridge. So this is a ridge line.
Yeah.
This is the ridge line they're trying to save. Huh?
Well.
And if you can look, it goes on into the distance.
Yes. The power lines are already there.
Power lines are there. The road is there.
The forest has been cut down.
Forest is gone.
This is from vtdigger.org, by the way. What's the title?
It's also in the comments. It's in this last week's comments.
Yes, that's right. This is what it's from.
It's called Timber Company Key Player in Controversial Turbine Plans.
Yes. The managing forester of Stilesbrook Forest in Windham County, and this is just a few miles from here. Yeah. Windham County, Vermont, sees an uncertain future because of climate change. Some signs are stunted trees, increasing numbers of invasive insects, and a dwindling moose population. A controversial plan to install 28 wind turbines at Stilesbrook is part of the solution. And
so this is in the 810 Commons, so it's the one that's out on the stands right now.
Yeah. Although by the time this show gets to be broadcast, it won't be.
Right.
But it'll be last week.
Today is the 16th to us.
Yes, right. So you and I went up there and we saw this.
Yeah.
And the forest was still in the beginning of recovery from having been clear cut.
Sort of.
Yeah, the whole thing had been clear cut.
But they're not going to let it grow because it's going to interfere with the power lines.
Well, where the power lines are, but that's already in the works.
Yeah.
I mean, they would put in some wind turbines, which don't occupy a huge amount of forest, and the rest of the forest would continue to be in the use.
It's going to be regrown.
It would be regrown, and it would continue to have the use that it currently has. Although the current owners did not clear cut it, and will not clear cut it. They're going to be doing their forestry using other techniques.
Oh, that's so they didn't own it when the power.
No, when the power lines went in, they didn't own it. When it was clear cut by the previous owner. Mm-hmm. They bought this land basically for a song because it had no value. Mm-hmm. It was junk land because it was such a complete wreck. And when we went through it, there were still stumps and there was still dead wood on the ground, and it was still a lot to trip over, but there were marks all over the place up there of wildlife, moose droppings and things like that.
Well, we've been to Searsburg.
Yes.
And on somebody's website, I don't know who's found, but it's easy to get. You see, they've put up cameras there.
Yeah.
Which they're automatically operated by movement.
Yeah.
And you see bears coming through there. You see deer coming through there.
Yes.
You see moose coming through there.
Yeah.
They don't give a damn.
Yes, of course they don't. The thing that's bothersome though here is you think about these invasive insects. There's two in particular. Well, one of them is an insect and the other is an arachnid. The insect that I'm worried about here at this particular forest, and so is Jeremy Turner. I've talked to him about this.
Have you? Yeah.
Is the Hemlock woolly adelgid.
Yeah, I've read about that. That's a nasty insect.
You have seen the work that these things do. If I mean, I went out on Route, what's the road to Bennington? 9?
9, yeah.
Yeah, I went out on Route 9 several weeks ago, and there were dead stands of trees conifers going out there, and my bet is that those had been killed by Hemlock woolly adelgids. I could be wrong.
Well, I've been thinking the same thing. I've been seeing here and there dead conifers.
Yes.
And
it's kind
of hard to tell when there's no leaves what kind of tree it was.
Well, when I was living down south of Boston, I remember my daughter saying, "Why are those trees in trouble? Why are those trees stressed?" And I hadn't noticed, as we were driving down the road. And the next year, almost all of the hemlocks that were in that area had turned red. Uh-huh. And the following year,
they were gone.
They were all dead. They were just dead trees. And when I moved to New Hampshire, back to the house that my family had had for so many years, I noticed a few years after that these things were moving north. And they had reached Irving, Massachusetts, which is just on the other side of the border from where I lived. And now they are in every town in Windham County. And the only thing that's keeping them in check from destroying forests is our cold winters. And of course, the coldest night on the coldest in the winter is now on average 10 degrees warmer than it was
used to be
50 years ago. So as a result of that, these woolly adelgids are staying alive. And I expect if this next winter is as warm as last winter was, we're probably going to see 30% of our forest die off in the next 2 years.
Wow.
And
I'm not going to hold you to that one.
Well, you know, I've seen this kind of thing happen before, and it is very ugly. And if you go on to, anybody who's interested in knowing about what this looks like, go online, go to Google, go to whatever search engine you want to look at, and do a search on adelgid, Adelgid, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
And, quote, ghost forest, end quote. And you're going to find pictures. There's a beautiful picture. It looks like fall colors. It looks like rolling hills. They've all turned beautiful shade of red, kind of a scarlet cover. Sorry, those things are fir trees.
Evergreens.
They're evergreens.
Wow.
And you just see rolling hills that are as far as the eye can see, kind of this scarlet color. And then you'll see other ones where it's bare wood. It's just dead trees, bare wood coming up out of the ground as far as the eye can see.
Wow.
In central Appalachia, in Pennsylvania, and wherever. And
so we're only 10 degrees from there.
Well, we may be there already for the hemlocks, but there's another kind of woolly adelgid. The hemlock woolly adelgids have just entered Vermont in the last 10 years, and they have established themselves in every town in Windham County and in, I think, north. Bennington County, and they're moving north. There's also the balsam woolly adelgid, which attacks firs and balsams and those kinds of trees. And they are already in every town, every county of Vermont. And again, they're being held in check. But the other one that I'm worried about is the deer tick.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, we ran through woods and fields, and we never bothered checking ourselves for ticks because there weren't any.
Yeah, but there are now.
There are now, and I'm hearing. I've actually come across a conspiracy theory that says that Lyme disease was invented by the CIA.
I've read that. Yeah.
Have you? and that's why nobody described it in medical literature until it was discovered in Lyme, Connecticut, because they had made a mistake and accidentally released it. And if you think about that, it doesn't make any sense. But the thing that really doesn't make sense is the Lyme disease was first described in medical literature in Europe.
Oh, yeah?
In the 18th century.
Oh, no kidding.
In Scotland.
Wow.
So, okay.
So the CIA could have done it.
Well, unless maybe the CIA preceded the United States. I don't know. But it was before,
You'll never know, huh?
Before the Declaration of Independence. This stuff has been around for a long time. It's just that it wasn't in American medical literature, and so the thing in Lyme, Connecticut. And it may be an invasive disease. I don't know. But the deer tick carries this, and that anybody whose life is affected by Lyme disease, you've been socked by climate change.
I know a woman that pretty much died of it.
Huh. Oh, man.
I mean, she
It's
was
sad.
badly crippled when I knew her.
But think about a moose getting it. Because
Yeah.
moose get it. And moose are also killed by deer ticks. They're actually bled to death.
I've heard you say that, yeah.
This is, and it's inexcusable that we would have a place like this defended against wind turbines I don't know. I don't mind, actually, if people don't want to have wind turbines. I don't mind that they don't want to have wind turbines, and maybe they shouldn't have wind turbines, but they should come up with an alternative, and they're not doing it.
No, you're right there.
I don't think they're not doing the individual people who are in these organizations that want to shut these things out are not doing their homework in terms of finding out what the truth is, what the facts are, but they're also not coming up with a solution. They're just saying what they don't want.
And it was almost humorous.
Yeah.
The stuff they were saying is that these things are going to do to you. You're going to make your hair fall out.
They're going to make your hair fall out. They're not going to make my hair fall out. Or maybe they're going to make it unnecessary for me to shave anymore. Yeah, well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have a wonderful week.
I think we've covered a lot today.
Bye-bye.
Gentle rains can fall.